Hey, everybody. This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good looking friends. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. Many of you have read this book, or at least dropped in on various YouTubers, including myself, to go through the highlights of what Tom Bauer had included in it. And it was rumored, I believe last year, that Tom Bauer was going to be writing additional chapters. Many of us were excited because there was talk about Tom Bauer putting a little bit of focus on Doria. Now, I'm not too sure if many of you know, but Tom Bauer did release an additional chapter. However, that chapter didn't include anything with Doria. I didn't see any chatter about this a while back when it came out and didn't think to cover it yet because there was so much other stuff going on. But in light of the events that has happened over the last 48 hours, I think now is the appropriate time to discuss this last chapter in this book. So please get yourself a beverage of your choice and get comfortable because it's story time. Chapter 44 Reconciliation Rejected. Tom Bauer begins this chapter by saying, "The scene was straight out of Hollywood. In Balmoral, enjoying her traditional summer holiday, the Queen was ailing. During their regular visits in August 2022, her eldest children, Charles and Anne, noticed the sharp deterioration in the 96-year-old monarch's health. Those who had predicted that within 1 year of Prince Philip's death, his wife would follow, could be well proved correct." So Tom Bauer is setting the scene that it is literally a month before the Queen's passing and now reviewing Meghan and Harry's moves and their behavior leading up to the Queen's death. He goes into saying, 5,000 miles away, meanwhile, Meghan Markle was launching her comeback, or as she called it, her next chapter. In the sunlit Montecito mansion, she was entertaining an obedient interviewer for The Cut magazine with crafted opinions about the world, inventing new fantasies about herself and issuing pointed threats. "I have a lot to say until I don't," said the woman who wrongly, and yes, Tom Bauer uses the word wrongly, described herself as a princess. Do you like that? Sometimes, as they say, the silent part is still part of the song. She had not signed a document, she explained in the piece, restricting her ability to speak about my whole life experience. After suffering all the hurt inflicted upon her by the royal family, she was still healing. And generously, she had considered forgiving the Windsors, but, she added, it takes a lot of energy to forgive. Her threat remained. I've really made an active effort, especially knowing that I can say anything. I'm going to pause here for a second. I dare Meghan to go forward and write a whole bunch of lies because I want to see King Charles release the Kraken on this woman and also then sue her into oblivion. I don't think this woman understands that she is playing with fire if she dares to even think to write a book breathing the family's name ever again. What I can see her doing is writing, as it has been reported, fiction stories. So these fiction stories most likely will be about the royal family. Let's be real, she has no other material to use. So I anticipate seeing her future projects that are most likely going to fail miserably be based around that kind of fantasy fiction story, but it's going to come from a place that will be attacking the family. For some, her self-pity grossly exaggerated her status in Britain, but Meghan was reassuringly certain she would survive their criticism. To prove the widespread sympathy for her plight, she described how a South African actor at the London premiere of The Lion King in 2019 had pulled her aside. He described, said Meghan, How in South Africa, on her wedding day, we rejoiced in the streets the same we did when Nelson Mandela was freed from prison. John Connie, the actor in question and only South African in the cast, would vehemently deny Meghan's version. It is baffling to me, Connie said. I've never met Meghan Markle. Her wedding, asserted Connie, was a non event in South Africa. Connie was supported by Mandela's grandson, expressing his surprise. Equating her wedding with Mandela's release after 27 years in prison was yet another example of Meghan's familiar self delusion. Although Meghan claimed never to read the media, she seemed well aware of the dismal worldwide reaction to her fantasies in the cut interview, not least in America. The New York Post derided the spoiled princess and the petulant princess, while the Washington Post urged the Sussexes to stop making themselves the center of the story. The criticism was easily ignored. Surrounded by talented sycophants eager to relaunch Brand Markle, Meghan was confronted by a carefully constructed plan to forge appearances and headlines. Success depended on the Sussexes generating fame or, failing that, notoriety. Either was acceptable so long as the punters took note. Promoting her much anticipated Spotify podcast series was the first task. Spotify's profits from the Sussexes relied on Archetypes, a series of 12 podcasts featuring Meghan's interviews with famous women. Her purpose, she said, was to investigate the labels that tried to hold women back, featuring Serena Williams. The first delivered another attack on the royal family. Meghan claimed that a fire had erupted in Archie's nursery during their 2019 tour of South Africa. Everyone's in tears and everyone is shaken, she explained. Shockingly, at the time, she had been nevertheless ordered by her accompanying staff to continue the tour. Within hours of publishing that allegation, Meghan's account was officially denied by the palace. There had been no fire in Archie's nursery. Meghan was unconcerned. Her admirers never bothered with contradictions to her sermons. The Archetypes podcast was a welcome vehicle from which to hear more about Meghan, her life ambition, struggle, and suffering. Even though Spotify dumped Meghan and Harry, you have to look at them and say, how stupid were you in the first place to offer this no talent nobody who thought that she was going to be the next biggest thing such a huge contract? I also say the same thing to Netflix. Like, what was the attraction with this woman? Anyhow, continuing. During the usual pressure to edit the podcast, Meghan was also awaiting the results produced by documentary film director Liz Garbus for the Netflix series agreed in 2020. She expected it to glorify herself as a global megastar married to a prince. The piece of my life I haven't been able to share, she believed, is our love story. The series, she expected, would reflect her carefully rehearsed symbolism. Just like salt and pepper pots, she explained, she and Harry always moved together. Any suggestion that the Sussexes would attack the royal family in the Netflix series was contradicted. After all, Meghan's abiding skill was to deny the real truth. I mean, why doesn't Tom Bauer just come out and say that Meghan is a compulsive liar? That's what she is. Let's not sugarcoat it anymore. She's a liar. Bran Markle's yet to be revealed ace was Harry's memoir. Secretly called Spare, an allusion to the heir and the spare, the book's anticipated publication in autumn 2022 was planned as a global phenomenon. Tight security had confined outsiders to mere speculation about the contents. As they had refused to retract any of the inaccuracies uttered to the Opera Winfrey, that's how Tom Bauer likes to call Oprah, opera, it was hard to believe that Harry's ghosted memoir would not contain other audacious allegations. The book's success depended upon generating sensational headlines, true or false, to damage the royal family. Some doubted whether Harry had carefully read the ghostwriter's script. By contrast, many assumed Meghan had vetted every sentence. To some, the book was more her version of events than Harry's. To engineer success across book, podcast, and docuseries, everything depended upon their continued visibility. In early September 2022, with the Queen still at Balmoral and increasingly hidden from the public eye, the couple embarked on a tour across Europe, accompanied by their Netflix crew. Continuing to promote themselves as members of the family they denounce, the Sussexes arrived in Dusseldorf on September 6, thrilled that the German government treated their visit to the venue for the 2023 Invictus Games as a royal tour, with police outriders, metal barriers, and a red carpet. The Sussexes were back at Frogmore Cottage on Wednesday, September 7th. In Balmoral that previous day, the Queen had met outgoing Prime Minister Boris Johnson and welcomed his successor, Liz Truss. Close examination of the brief video of the informal ceremony showed a frail but smiling and well-coiffed monarch. Then, unexpectedly, during the morning of September 8th, a phone call to Harry revealed that the Queen was dying. A private jet, Harry was told, was ready for him to fly with his brother William to Aberdeen to see his grandmother before she died. The news caused turmoil at Frogmore. At Meghan's suggestion, aka demand, Harry insisted that he would be accompanied by his wife, and that plan was broadcast to journalists at 1:53 p.m. I'm assuming they told Scobie that. Meghan's expectation was astonishing. For 4 years, she had rejected the Queen's invitations to visit Balmoral, but in her last hours of life, Meghan eagerly sought to make the journey. Firmly, Harry was told that Meghan was not welcome. Unwilling to waste more time, William ordered the RAF jet to take off at 2:39 p.m. Harry was left to hire his own plane and make the journey alone. He landed in Scotland at 6:46 p.m., 14 minutes after the Queen's death had been announced to the public. She had died at 3:10 p.m. If I was Prince William, I would never forgive Harry for denying or being the reason that he didn't get a chance to say his final goodbye to his grandmother because it was Harry arguing over this bitch wife that he's got, wasting precious time. Like, what world would anybody think that that was okay for Meghan to assert herself? Like, the family should have outright said, no, Meghan, you're not even allowed to come to the funeral. We don't want to see your devil face in the house of the Lord. You know what I'm saying? Harry's festering anger towards William and Charles overhung the grief in Balmoral Castle. That night, Harry refused to eat dinner with his father and William. He left before breakfast to catch a commercial flight back to London. You know, when you reflect back on the way that these two behaved during that grieving period, the self-importance that they had and made it all about themselves, it's quite disgusting. And Meghan is downright deplorable. She is right there with what they categorize as the deplorables, like in the gutter. Remember Harry's demand for a formal role wearing his uniform during the funeral? He was angry that it was rejected. Simultaneously, the couple hesitated about showing any sign of reconciliation with the Cambridges. Neither Harry nor Meghan had any intention of apologizing for telling these inaccuracies to Oprah Winfrey. Their reservations were overcome by Netflix's eye for a touching scene to add to their documentary. Thankfully, William, the new Prince of Wales, took the initiative. Aware of the crowds gathered outside Windsor Castle, he agreed to meet the loyal well-wishers. The optics would be hugely improved, William realized, if he and Kate were joined by the Sussexes. After a difficult conversation, Harry agreed. Meghan seized the opportunity to be seen, but kept everyone waiting while she fixed her appearance and makeup. 2 days after the Queen's death, the two couples greeted the crowd held back by metal barriers. In her perfect actress mode, Meghan smiled, chatted with well-wishers, and accepted flowers. The priceless exposure was only once marred by her anger, which showed itself when a helpful aide took some flowers from her. Meghan flashed irritation at the image of her being deluged by blooms being ruined. After a 40-minute walkabout, the four stood tensely side by side for the media. The final TV shot showed Harry in a car before being driven back to Frogmore. Angrily, he exhaled his breath as if exhausted by the charade. Talk of reconciliation and olive branches by the media was phony. Kate had barely looked at Meghan, and they exchanged not a sentence in public. Without a profuse apology from Meghan and Harry, the Cambridges were unwilling to forgive the Sussexes for their dishonesty. I give it to the Brits and Catherine for being so controlled and not expressing, the obvious contempt for Meghan and Harry at that moment for all the pain that these two have caused. If this was in the United States, and I'm just saying, if I was in Catherine's shoes, I wouldn't have been so controlled. It probably would have turned into a full on Jerry Springer episode and hair extensions flying all over the place. I mean, when you think back, every day for 10 days, there was something the Harkles were bitching and moaning and complaining about. On the eve of the funeral, Harry was allowed to wear his uniform once for vigil at the lying in state at Westminster Hall, along with the Queen's other grandchildren. To his anger, the ER insignia had been removed from his uniform by Buckingham Palace official. Well, let's pause for a second. Harry wasn't so mad the day of his wedding when he didn't wear it, so why make a big deal about it now? Oh, because you need to put the attention back on yourself, right, Harry? We get it. To add to Meghan's irritation, the couple were not invited by the new king to the reception at Buckingham Palace for 500 visiting heads of state and dignitaries after the vigil. The decision was intolerable. Did the king not realize how valuable their presence would have been? For the Queen's final journey, a slow march to Westminster Abbey on Monday, September 19th, Harry wore a morning suit, walking behind the coffin, while Meghan was seated in a limousine with Sophie Wessex. Inconspicuous in the procession, both women were silently stony faced. Yet clearly, Meghan had won. Across the globe, being part of the funeral procession branded her as a member of the royal family. Yeah, and a complete stain on history. Forever, that witch is going to be etched in history books. I think it might be an idea for the people of the UK to possibly lobby Parliament or maybe even the King, asking him to issue some type of royal decree or maybe if it's a letters patent to state that any history books in the future being placed in schools covering this historical event, place a candle over Meghan's face and give the proper respect to Sir Candle. Look, since Meghan and Harry like to practice rewriting history, I think the royal family needs to start doing that and erase this woman from being a part of that historical event. It's my opinion, but Meghan had no business being at that funeral. She shouldn't even been near that coffin. In fact, the royal family should have put her back on a plane and sent her back home to be with those invisible children. Before the Sussexes departed unobserved for Los Angeles, no apologies were offered to the royal family for past acrimonies. The scene was set for a showdown in the Netflix series and Harry's memoir. Pending those events, Charles resisted bestowing the princely titles on the Sussexes' two children and retained the option of withdrawing the Sussex title from the couple themselves. Money guaranteed that Harry's memoir would be published after the Queen's funeral. Neither Harry nor his publishers could afford to bear the loss of the millions of pounds already invested in the project. And the publishers were helped by the reality that neither Harry nor Meghan were prepared to control their attempts at revenge against the grieving royal family. For the sake of their careers and expensive lifestyle, their tentative truce before the Queen's funeral was abandoned. Those who speculated that Harry would dilute the text to remove the most offensive descriptions of Charles, William, and Kate would need to acknowledge that his book could only score commercial success with a healthy dollop of poison. Back in California, Meghan reignited her self promotion campaign. The Queen, she told Variety magazine in a hastily arranged interview, was the most shining example of female leadership. Noticeably, she had refused to acknowledge that accolade in her Vogue issue, Forces for Change, in 2019. The Queen had been omitted from the list of 15 brilliant female changemakers. Post funeral, claiming to be proud of the warmth of her close relationship with the Queen, Meghan forgot to mention that she had only traveled once with the monarch. Yet in the interview about herself, illustrated by a photo that showed her lying on her stomach, kicking her legs in the air, she blurted, I feel deep gratitude to have been able to spend time with her and get to know her. The Queen never appeared to reciprocate that sentiment. Meghan's acknowledgement of this was her admission to Variety that her visit to Britain was a complicated time. Meghan's misfortune was that while some magazines indulged in her self promotion, the public were becoming less interested. An accompanying Variety video featuring her master recipe for solid bolognese sauce attracted 2,600 likes and 18,000 thumbs down. America was divided, but that still left a substantial number who admired Meghan. No, Tom Bauer, I think that that's inaccurate. Because Meghan had inflated her image online with all those bots, the representation was not accurate. And clearly, after they released their Netflix and all this other stuff that had been pumping out by the Sussex camp, America had been fed up. We've been fed up for the last few years with them, but now more and more people are talking about it. The media is to blame for the assumption that America was in love with this couple. We never were in love with them. And I wish that other commentators would step up and admit that instead of saying things because it's supporting whichever political side. To impress their American fans, it was agreed that the RFK Human Rights Foundation should award the couple the Robert F. Kennedy Ripple of Hope Award. At the gala ceremony, where tickets cost up to $1 million, they would be praised for their moral courage, for making a lifelong commitment to building strong and equitable communities, and thereby making a positive social impact for racial justice and mental health. The Sussexes were praised at the ceremony hosted by Carrie Kennedy, Robert's daughter, for having the courage to challenge the royal family's power structure, especially the family's structural racism. The scandal was that Harry had adopted Meghan's inaccurate version in the Oprah Winfrey interview of his own conversation with Charles and Camilla about his potential child's appearance. Look, we all know that this was set up by the Harkles. They bought that award and created all the noise around it. And when I say noise, remember Fugazi Nagazi and screaming racism in the palace? Of course, they needed to drum that up with Lady Susan Hussey and set her up to create this big production right before Catherine and William came over to the United States for the Earthshot Prize. Obviously, this was something that was calculated and set up by, you guessed it, our faves. Okay? So we know who the shit stirrers are. And when you look at the various events or milestones that the family has to make an impact, Meghan and Harry are right there trying to sabotage it. Let's not forget William and Catherine's trip to Jamaica and how the Sussex squids ended up stirring shit over there. Remember, Meghan and Harry fund and support these radical extremists who want to bring down the monarchy. Yet, despite all their efforts, the Sussexes struggled to prosper as A-listers. The former C-list Z-list actress, now unable to be cast in a film, could not afford the lifestyle of an A-lister. Her skill was to appear undaunted and display conviction that the world was interested in her thoughts. Accordingly, Meghan addressed the Women's Fund in Indianapolis. At the same venue in 2018, Michelle Obama attracted a sellout 13,000 audience. Meghan attracted fewer than 2,000 people to hear a speech about a favorite topic, herself. Similar disappointment hit her Spotify series extolling modern women. Meghan described her candid interviews with Mariah Carey, Constance Wu, Sophie Trudeau, and Paris Hilton as looking at the nuances. Digging deeper to display her self awareness, she added that her show was really about dissecting and unboxing these labels, these tropes that try to hold women back and define women as one note. The modern woman, she said, was perfectly normal as a multifaceted human being. Her audience, she hoped, would accept her humanization and conclude, oh, Megan's a real person. Instead, after the first podcast, none featured in Spotify's top 100, although later ratings published by Spotify curiously gyrated between 77 and even 22 in the chart. Rather, the shows generated caustic mirth that the so called interviews were in reality an opportunity to talk about herself. In one podcast, she damned her experience on 34 episodes of Deal or No Deal in 2006 as objectifying her as a bimbo. Only her body, rather than her brains, she complained, was appreciated. How can you peel back the layers on the cultural script? She asked thoughtfully. That is quote unquote dumb blonde? She forgot to mention, and her newly appointed fact checker failed to signal, that thanks to the show, she had befriended Brett Ratner, the Hollywood film producer, and he, as a return favor, had cast her in Horrible Bosses, which helped to secure her part in Suits. Meghan's appeal depended on ignoring the truth. Just be yourself no matter what any societal framework or archetype or loud voice coming from a small place tells you that you should be, she advised in a podcast about demystifying the dragon lady. Oh, right. That was the one where she had mentioned she went to a Korean spa, I believe, and was walking around naked with her mom, in which we later discovered that she copied a cartoon from Netflix. Right. In another, The Decoding of Crazy, she denounced those unidentifiable people who called her crazy, hysterical, nuts, and insane. Well, I think they were accurately describing her, and clearly what we have witnessed are exactly those very same adjectives. If you don't agree, let me know down below in the comment section. The description difficult, she said, was a code word for bitch, used to gaslight strong women. Her solution for survival, said Meghan, was to ask what was the best for myself instead of trying to please everyone else. Narcissism had fueled her route to fame. Unexpectedly, Meghan's life now mirrored the Deal or No Deal show. Presented with a choice, she had decided not to play safe. She chose not to live any other way. The new year 2023 would be her make or break. There was no return from the high risk stakes. If the public applauded both her Netflix series and Harry's memoir, the Sussexes would be richer and undeniably established as Hollywood celebrities. But if their gamble misfired, attracting public hostility and Charles's retaliation, their future would be bleak. The global audience eagerly awaited the outcome. As a fighter, she was strong. As a vulnerable woman, she would be devastated by defeat. Either way, there would be an intriguing sequel to her rise to fame and fortune. And this is where Tom Bauer ends this chapter. I don't know if he is going to continue to keep writing because I do think that there's a lot more that's going to come out that needs to be told. Perhaps maybe Tom will do a revenge too. Let's hope. This was all that was included in the extra material, and I find it interesting. Tom Bauer has been accurately calling it out, per se, and he has not been sued. So obviously, he has done his research, he has done his work, and he has paid attention to not the noise and the fluff that Meghan and her team have been shoving down our throats for the last 6 years. He actually is getting to the truth of who she really is. And I do believe that we are seeing the downfall now of this couple. And the only way, and Tom's curiosity as well as the rest of ours, is what is going to be the sequel to Meghan coming out on top and reaching wealth and power and everything that she so greedily wants? I think it's going to be off the back of another man. I don't think Meghan will be able to do anything on her own and be the success that she believes that she is without riding off of another man, because let's face it, that's where she's had the most success. I thought that reading this chapter would be appropriate now in light of everything that we have seen go on, and it puts things in perspective as to really what Meghan's leverage or power that she has, or perceived power that she has now. It's not so bright. And we're watching this. And like I said, the karma train is coming through. Choo choo, choo choo. I don't know. What do you guys think? Definitely leave your thoughts and comments below. But as always, I will be back with more content. But until then, please be safe, and I will talk to you later. Bye.
Such a fraud.